Happy Friday, happy last day of June, happy end of the academic calendar year for college athletics. All of that happens today. Calhoun here and Caleb Jarreau. It's the Caleb Show for Off the Hook Sports. Dave Hooker it's our final day without Dave Hooker as he's still on vacation. And so I got Caleb Jarreau for the whole show today. So it legitimately is the Caleb Show. Jarreau, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for the Caleb Show. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. We got a lot of things to talk about today. There's actually a commitment coming this afternoon that Jarreau has written about that we are going to cover later this afternoon that we don't know where he's going to go, but his commitment date is there. Talk a little bit about that just real quick before we dive in, Jarreau.
Yeah, so Braylon Staley is announcing his commitment today at 4 p.m. I'd say it's probably between Tennessee and Clemson off the top of my head, but I would say Tennessee is probably leading for him. So if the Vols end up picking up another athlete / slot receiver, wide receiver in general at 4 o'clock, do not be surprised.
All right, I will be here to cover it, and we'll have, whatever happens, we'll have a story on it. As far as coverage today, we have an interesting PFF grade that's high on a Tennessee defensive back. Yes, a defensive back. Crazy enough, which is crazy to think about given what happened last year. We got an anonymous coach saying Tennessee must develop depth at wide receiver. Another kind of surprising thing. And then also Neyland Stadium, the second toughest place to play, ranked in the country. And staying on that topic, where would you send a foreigner for their first college football game? I'm going to share a Reddit post with you that kind of got me intrigued yesterday. And then we'll close with the NCAA and NIL. The NIL with the NCAA is conflicting with some state laws. So we got a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and dive in with this stat. Jarreau, this blew me away when I read this yesterday. PFF College listed their highest graded returning safeties in the SEC. And wouldn't you know it, Wesley Walker was number one at 77.5. I know he developed at the end of last year. I know he got a lot better as the season went on. But I got to be honest, this shocked me. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think if we saw any defensive back on this list, we would be shocked. Wesley Walker, anybody else in that secondary from last season. But like you said, he did come on at the end of the year, and he did enroll. He did enroll in Tennessee until June of last year. So just this month, he's been at Tennessee a year, and he's already the highest graded SEC safety. So I'm curious to see what he does this season now that he's had a year in the system. And I think we've talked about this before. DB is a lot easier to learn than safety. So him being in the system a year will actually help more than if he was just a defensive back and they can say, hey, guard this guy or sit in this zone.
Yeah, exactly. And with Trey Flowers gone, this is a huge, huge deal for Tennessee. With Jalen McCullough is back, and we knew McCullough would have to lead, but Wesley Walker developing towards the end of last year could turn out to be a much bigger deal than we thought.
Yeah, whenever you have a guy like Trey Flowers leave, a leader on your defense, that's going to be a big hole to fill. And I'm pretty sure he led the team in tackles for most of the season. So whenever you have somebody like Wesley Walker who graded out, it was PFF said he was a 77.5, and then there's nobody else from Tennessee on the list. So to have him lead the defense and be able to come back this season, that would be great for Tennessee as well. And like you said, we expect Jalen McCullough, Tank McCullough, to be a leader on the defense, but obviously, if he doesn't have to do it by himself and you have a guy like Wesley Walker over the top, then that would be very helpful to the Vols this season.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a possibility? Look, Tennessee's highest draft pick 2 years ago, we forget, was a defensive back in Alontae Taylor. Is it possible a defensive back secondary could become their strength this year, one of their strengths that shocks us all?
I think everybody hopes that the secondary could become a strength because then you wouldn't have to worry about Tennessee's offense having to put up 50, 60 points a game. But I don't know if we'll ever see it necessarily become a strength for Tennessee, just for the simple fact that the up-tempo offense does not leave a lot of rest time for those guys. Now, with that being said, you do have a lot of returners in the secondary that'll help you. And you have transfers like a guy like Gabe Judy-Lolly who has a lot of experience playing football in the SEC and for BYU. And you've got highly touted freshmen like Jordan Matthews and Ricky Gibson coming in, who if you need defensive back depth, you can put them on the field instantly. So if we see a slew of injuries like we did last season, I won't be worried as much with the guys that they have behind them. And hopefully after watching last season, they can make some adjustments in the secondary and try to improve and not get diced up by Anthony Richardson again or another subpar offense.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that it'll be much better. I think Jordan Matthews or Ricky Gibson, I think one of them is going to end up starting at cornerback. I'm talking about in the opener. I think we're going to see one of them starting immediately at cornerback. Warren Burrell getting healthy certainly helps. But this stat, I mean, this data point is huge because free safety was a huge question mark. And if Walker can just step in there and start with McCullough, I mean, look, we're really talking about a secondary that it could be significantly better. I would say the Florida game last year, the issue was I don't put too much stock in that because you could tell Tim Banks his whole philosophy was make them move the ball down the field. So we'll play soft coverage a lot. And the more plays they have to run, the more likely they are to mess up or make a mistake. And that happened just enough times for Tennessee to build a 3-score lead. So I'm not sure that was the best philosophy because Tennessee did almost blow that 3-score lead in the end with a bunch of crazy stuff that happened. But I will say I'll give them credit for I think that they're better. I think it was kind of their philosophy to let Anthony Richardson throw for that many yards. Now, Spencer Rattler, that was a different story because he just scored on every possession, pretty much. But I would say that, yeah, the secondary, look, if they just get marginally better, I mean, we're talking about a much, much better team overall if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, and even think about it just with Wesley Walker, he's going to have another year in the system. He'll be more comfortable at safety. If you have him on one side, and like you said, Jalen McCullough on the other, I don't see a lot of teams torching over the top with them playing at their best. And like you said, it was kind of like that bend but don't break defense against Florida, which works at times. And Tim Banks really likes to be aggressive in the front seven. So, like you said, even marginally better, they're not giving up 100 or they're not like ranked 131st in pass defense. So I do think they'll make a jump. How big of a jump, I'm not 100% sure, but it's hard to believe that Tim Banks would let the defense stay stagnant from last season.
Yep. And looking at some of these other highest rated safeties on here, Hudson Clark from Arkansas is on there, and Al Walcott from Arkansas is on there. So it looks like Arkansas might have the best 1-2 punch at safety in the SEC this year. Then you got Zion Childress from Kentucky, CJ Taylor from Vanderbilt, Dalen Carnell from Missouri, Alex Afari from Kentucky. Again, 2 Kentucky players, Greg Brooks Jr. from LSU, Jalen Key from Alabama. So Tennessee's going to face 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people on the list, and including 2 on Kentucky alone. And that's something they have to be prepared for. You know, I spoke with Josh Ward yesterday after you got off the show, and we were talking about how dangerous of a trap game Kentucky is for Tennessee this year, with them coming right after Alabama. And if their safeties are that elite, Tennessee's really got to be ready for that one.
Yeah, and I really like Josh Heupel's offense because he can take the safety out of the game. So I really think it seems like like you said, if you have 2 good safeties, well, you kind of have to commit. Is the safety going to help in the run game, or is he going to help over the top? Is he going to help in the middle? And then wherever that safety isn't, you have to trust Joe Milton and the offense to attack that spot. So, and I think Kentucky's always been that sort of team that causes problems for Tennessee. I mean, they're well coached, and then especially if you consider they're coming after Alabama, win or lose against Alabama, it'll be an emotionally draining game, and then you have to play Kentucky the next week. So I could see that being a trap game for sure. And I really just think Joe Milton could be able to move safeties around, especially in Tennessee's offense. It doesn't seem like the hardest thing to force a safety to go right and then you throw left or something like that to kind of take them out of the game, which if you have 2 really good safeties, that's really what you have to do, is take them out of the game.
Yeah, and that's where the speed at receiver becomes crucial. You got to make sure that they can get that, beat their cornerbacks off the break, and then Joe Milton can chuck it 70 yards downfield and Squirrel White can catch it. And so, which is a pretty simple game plan this year. Travis jumped in and said Joe Milton will expose those Kentucky safeties, take them off the list. Okay, I'm not taking them off the list. Okay, I think the point that Jarreau is making, and he's right, and we both agree, is that if you're going to beat Tennessee, you have to do it with cornerbacks, not safeties. You have to have elite cornerbacks that can win those matchups with receivers. Now, Tennessee, on the other hand, they probably rely a lot more on safety help, which is why it's good for them that Wesley Walker is on here, because as you brought up, Tim Banks likes to disguise a lot of pressure packages and bring a lot of blitzes and things like that with his front seven. That puts a lot of pressure on the safeties to make plays.
Yeah, and You actually bring a good point, because now that you think about it, like if Wesley Walker can hold his own a lot more, like, and help the front seven, we could see a lot more of those pressure packages. Because I feel like some games when the secondary was getting torched, Tim Banks couldn't blitz as much as he wanted to, because if he did, they'd really get beat over the top. So he had to have people back in coverage. So now if you have, guys like Amari Thomas or some of your edge rushers getting after the quarterback this season with safety help, then you could see a lot more sacks. And then you don't have to worry about them passing the ball at all, because the quarterback will be on his back.
Yeah. And trust me, safeties love it when front seven splits, because that because that allows them to rack up a lot more interceptions. It's Fred White, who we have every Friday. Usually we had him Wednesday. This week played with Deion Grant in 99, and Deion Grant came away with 9 interceptions in a year because, Tennessee left their corners bare on the outside. And so the job was to try to force errant throws with pressure packages, and typically errant throws, the safeties have the best chance of making plays on those balls. So I think we might see a lot of that this year.
I agree, and hopefully you get to see Tim Banks really run his defense, because he has good schemes and, like you said, pressure packages that are successful. But it felt like at times last year, just with depth and guys out, and his secondary kind of failing with guys in there who probably were out of position, he wasn't able to really show all his pressure packages and really run the defense he wants to. But now you see that he has time to recruit, get some depth, get some transfers in. He can actually show his playbook and how he wants to run the defense.
Yep. And as long as you don't get beat over the top, again, it's just natural law of averages. The more plays you have to run to score, the more likely you are to make a mistake before you score. That's kind of my Heupel's offensive philosophy, is 6 plays or less to score. It's the Mike D'Antoni offense, but for football.
Yep. Take out the big play, and I really think the defense will be a lot better, because and thinking about it, some of the big plays they gave up, nobody was even close. So I find it hard to believe that that'll happen this year, or that the quarterback will even have that much time to throw it.
Yeah, and I also don't think a key linebacker is going to start a fight with the quarterback over whether or not they make more NIL money and then get suspended for a crucial game with the playoff on the line. So that's how that goes. Moving on to the other side of the ball. So a secondary player for Tennessee being the highest graded at their position was a shocker. But now another shocker comes in. And I wish I had Dave's What the H, because I wish I had the What the H sound check. So just y'all bear with this. We're going to call this What the H without the soundtrack, because this is an absolute What the H, which is an anonymous coach speaking to Athlon. On3 just reported this the other day. Said something crazy. So the first part he said was Joe Milton is not going to be Hendon Hooker, so the ceiling won't be as high. Okay. You can agree or disagree, but anybody who watched the 2 play could agree that Joe Milton's ceiling may not be as high as Hooker's. Fair enough. Then he says, quote, they need to develop more depth at wide receiver to stay creative. This system is like a new age option offense where it's just hard as hell to practice it in a single week, and you get burned easily because you're tired. You can't replicate the tempo and pace unless you do it a little bit all season. What in the world is this coach saying to say they need to develop more depth at wide receiver? That's not an issue for them at all, Jarreau. Do you think that's an issue?
I guess the only thing he would be saying is because they run up tempo in practice, you don't want your receivers to get tired. But that was not a problem last season. You had Jalen Hyatt dealt with injury, Cedric Tillman dealt with injury, Brew McCoy dealt with injury for a couple games there, and the wide receivers were still okay. They still had wide receivers on the field and were able to run their offense. So if that doesn't show that they have enough depth, and they picked up more bodies this year. So if they were able to have enough depth last year in Heupel's second year at Tennessee, he was able to have wide receiver depth. I don't understand what this person is talking about. I guess I get where they're coming from, but they're talking about it like they've never seen a Tennessee football game before.
This coach might be Butch Jones. And the reason I say that, the reason I say that is the Butch Jones philosophy, and Brian Kelly somewhat adopts this at LSU, and that's fine. But people who use elements of the spread back in the early 2010s, the philosophy was you have to run a lot of receivers in and out to keep them fresh. And so you never really had a go-to receiver. Well, anybody that watches Josh Heupel's offense knows he doesn't do that. He's got 2 or 3 receivers, and that's it. You know what I mean? And he keeps them in the same rotation consistently. I mean, it was so frustrating watching Butch Jones' offense back in the day. One, he never really ran tempo the way he should have at Tennessee. He was too nervous, so Tennessee was huddling up most of the time, even though he said they were going to be a no-huddle offense. And then they never could get a receiver to get into rhythm because they constantly rotated guys in and out, and it just, you never felt that they had the right chemistry because Butch Jones wouldn't stick with guys that were doing it well. I come from the David Cutcliffe, Lane Kiffin philosophy, which I think Heupel employs. And Drew, I want to know where you come in on this. I think you're better off if you have one go-to receiver, 2 other really key receivers, and that's it, pretty much, in rotation.
Yeah, and even then, like, we see Josh Heupel doesn't like to sub off his running back because it allows the defense to sub. So why would he all of a sudden start rotating his receivers? And, like, imagine Jalen Hyatt goes for 70 yards for a touchdown last season, and the next time they come out on offense, Heupel's like, no, you need to stay on the bench. Like, that would just be stupid. Your guy just got a touchdown and he's hot. Why would you take him off the field? It's like in baseball, like if your best hitter hits a home run and then you tell him he's done. Like, you'll hit again in a couple of days. It doesn't make sense. If you've got, like you said, a go-to wide receiver, make him the go-to wide receiver. I can guarantee that these guys condition enough to deal with the up-tempo offense. Even as a wide receiver, when you're huddling up, it's not that much of a difference because if you think about it, you're running almost 50 yards to the huddle if you're an outside wide receiver. So there's really no break from tempo to a no-huddle offense either. So this is a crazy statement.
Yeah. It's a philosophy that never made sense to me. I never understood why people felt that wide receivers need to be fresher. Wide receivers aren't getting hit every play. They're not tackling every play. They're tackled sometimes when they catch the ball, and that's still a 50-50 proposition because a lot of times they go down and go out of bounds. So this idea that, like, wide receivers get tired the least of anybody on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm sorry, this whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous to me. I think Tennessee. And let's go through the list real quick, Joe. So we're talking Brew McCoy, Ramel Keaton. Anybody who watched Tennessee last year knows Squirrel White's emerging. Dante Thornton is already proven. I just named 4 guys, and that doesn't even count the freshmen and the young guys like Nathan Leacock, who might actually make an impact. Where do they not have depth?
Or you still got like the Caleb Webbs or your sophomores who sat last season and learned how to play the offense. Like it. And you also have to remember, Jalen Hyatt was not running a streak every play. And they still had run plays mixed in where Jalen Hyatt probably would not even move off the line. It just doesn't
Yep.
I mean, if your wide receivers are burnt out and gassed, how do you think your big guys feel? Like,
Yeah,
how do you think they feel watching a wide receiver sub in because the other guy was tired when they're on their 6th play in 30 seconds? It just doesn't add up. The argument does not make much sense for what they're trying to say here.
And one of the interesting things is because of the wide splits Heupel uses, the wide receivers don't even have to block in Heupel's system, which would actually take out some more stamina. Because quite honestly, there's no reason to block because those cornerbacks guarding the wide receivers are not going to be able to tackle the running back on a running play. So I mean, they're too far away from the line. So the wide receivers have the easiest job in this system. You don't have to block. And you're schemed open. I mean, this is why I think every great wide receiver should want to go to Tennessee. It's the best system to play in for a wide receiver by far.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, you do have to cut the wide receivers some slack. They are running routes most downs. But like you said, a lot of Josh Heupel's drives end up being 10 plays, maybe max 11. And I think that's even pushing it. And then they go sit on the sideline and get to rest, recover. Your wide receivers are not going to be the ones getting it. Maybe at the end of the game, was Jalen Hyatt tired after scoring, 4 or 5 touchdowns against Alabama? Maybe. But I don't think he's tired on the 3rd play of the first quarter to where he's asking for a sub.
Yeah, and I'm still not so sure if he was tired because, I mean, again, he only called 6 passes in that game. 6 passes, 200 yards, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wild.
This take is crazy. And then the quote continues, and it's like, when they're up on you, Neyland is a nightmare to play in. That stadium is back to where it used to be. Like, it just doesn't, like, where does that part come in? They threw that part in. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of what was said, it's like I could see it makes sense, but this whole the whole. Also, I'm not so sure it's a new age option offense either. I don't really see I mean, I know the quarterback has the option of reading the safety and where to go, but there are not a lot of option running plays here that Tennessee's running. Do you see any of that?
I mean, their wide receivers do have to choose their routes, but I wouldn't say that's as big of a deal as the option. I mean, that's just choosing if the cornerback's on your right, you run left. If the cornerback's on your left, you run right. That's not reading a defensive end or doing anything crazy. I think maybe they just mean sort of like revolutionary, I would guess. That's what I'm saying. Like, none of the stuff that this anonymous coach said to Athlon Sports really adds up in any way. It's kind of weird. And it's funny in the On3 article, the writer goes on at the end to list off all the wide receivers Tennessee has and their stats. Like, Brew McCoy leads the returning group with 667 yards from last year. And then Squirrel White hauled in nearly 500 receiving yards last season. And I don't think he played more than probably 2 full games. So it just doesn't make much sense.
So what we're going to say, I think Jarreau and I have agreed the verdict is in, the jury is in. This coach does no ball. This coach isn't a ball guy. Are we agree?
Yeah, it really just seems like he hasn't watched it. I mean, now if somebody said, like, just didn't know that Tennessee had wide receiver depth, then that would be one thing. But he's acting like he hasn't watched a Tennessee game all year or ever, with a Josh Heupel coached game really ever. Talking about the wide receivers burning out because Jalen Hyatt won the award for being one of the best wide receivers in the country, and he played every game, practiced every day. I assume there was probably no burnout there for him to continue the way he did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it made no sense. This came from Butch Jones. And okay, Travis had a great quote. Jarreau, this is a good question. I'd love to see a triple option package out of our team. Could you imagine if Tennessee had like running all this tempo and at one point they run the triple option?
They just stick them in they start running the wing tee with wide splits. That would be funny.
That'd be hilarious. Look, I said, I think there's room for the single wing to come back, man. I'm telling you, for those who don't know history, Tennessee, Robert Neyland built Tennessee up by running the single wing in the 1920s. At the time, it was ahead of its time. But then Tennessee fell off because they stuck to it way too long into the 50s and the 60s. So just interesting stuff. When we come back, got a little more to talk about. Got some stadium things to talk about. Neyland Stadium, ranked the second toughest place to play in the nation. And if a foreigner was visiting the United States looking to go to a college football game, which stadium would you recommend? We're going to talk about that in 2 minutes. Stick with us.
And Craving Wings South North Shore location, where we've heard people say that you can get the best wings in East Tennessee. Pero ¿quién es este? El número 87, Jacob Warren.
I'll just do 6 in my sauce 87, please.
Imposible, señorita. Dale 6 más. Look at these wings. Perfectas, deliciosas, fantásticas.
Man, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. How do you say fresh, never frozen in Spanish?
Frescas, nunca congeladas. Make your way to Craving Wings and get you 6 más.
But what was funny about Cadis, we were a full continuum of care at that time. We had detox, we had inpatient, we had outpatient. So we were doing a lot of the things that we do now. But now we just do them so much better. It's really a simple program, but we're complicated people. I am what I am, and now I got to do something about it.
You can take your life back. Call Cadis today.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
I would like to thank Mr. Jones before we get going. Mr. Jones, you are correct. It is Neyland, not Neyland. It's a bad old habit of mine. I try to correct myself, but when you were raised to say it a certain way and that way was wrong, it's like the people who say Missouri. And so
this is disappointing, Calhoun.
I know. I'm very ashamed of myself. Before we move on, portions of the program brought to you by Craft Treats. CraftTreats.com is your home for the best pet treats in the world. They even have CBD-infused treats that can minimize your pet's digestive, arthritic, or anxiety issues. Go to CraftTreats.com. All right, so our man Brad Crawford. I've been hating on him all week because he's had a lot of different stuff, but I'm not hating on him today. So this is an actually interesting take that he does on 247 Sports, which is the 10 toughest stadiums to play in the nation. Neyland Stadium, came in at number 2 to Tiger Stadium at LSU. Joe, I'm going to be honest with you. I was actually shocked that Neyland was that high. What do you make of this?
I think after Tennessee with Josh Heupel this last season and the program is back, I would say probably Neyland Stadium deserves to be number 2. I understand the argument that people make for Penn State and the big house and stuff like that, but I would say Neyland Stadium at number 2 is probably its rightful place, especially on a Saturday night with, Alabama or this season with Georgia in town.
So I half agree. I don't understand the big house at all. That thing should not be in the top 10. That is not a tough place to play. That is not that loud. The way the stadium is built, that thing gets quiet as heck. It is not. Michigan ain't an intimidating place to play at all. Beaver Stadium is. I'll give them that. It's funny. I'm saying this. Y'all are going to hate me. Well, people in Georgia are going to hate me. Athens ain't a tough place to play either. They think they showed Tennessee fans something after Tennessee fans said that last year, and then they got loud at Athens. No, Georgia was just the better team. Fans had nothing to do with Georgia beating Tennessee last year. Okay, that still wasn't that loud of a stadium, so I'm not going to go there. But yeah, I agree. I could see Neyland number 2. The thing that you're right. I think this has a lot to do with the state of the program, because I think all things being equal, I got to be honest. I think the Swamp is also louder than Neyland. I've been to the Swamp. It's a louder place. That doesn't mean the fans are more raucous or anything like that. It's just the way the stadium is designed. The Swamp is a brutal place to play. But it is very true that Tiger Stadium at LSU should be number 1. Anybody that – and oh, my gosh, I know my LSU homerism is coming out again. Guys, if y'all think I'm an LSU homer, Jarreau's from Louisiana. So we got LSU love going on right now. So, but
I'm not the one always talking about how good Brian Kelly is, though. That would be the other Caleb.
Yes. I am very, very, very high on Brian Kelly and LSU. But Tiger Stadium is a brutal place to play. They registered an earthquake on the Richter scale, guys. Now, I know LSU Swamp, Marshland, whatever, but LSU is – anybody that's been to an LSU game at night, Jarreau, that is a brutal place to play for opposing teams.
Yeah, it gets super, super loud. Tennessee got let off easy, I guess, with the noon game, which with also going into it, even if it was a night game for Tennessee, the way their offense runs, it's very easy to silence a stadium. Because imagine, picture they go into, Bryant-Denny Stadium this season, and then Joe Milton throws a 70-yard touchdown to Squirrel White. It'll get quiet pretty quick. So whenever I remember doing research before the LSU game, Tennessee's offense is really, really good at silencing opposing crowds. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, because there's just the crowd doesn't know when to get loud because they're just running up tempo the whole time.
No, that's a very good point. You're right. The way Tennessee plays, there's not a lot of play calling necessary. So the home crowd can't really mess up, can't really intimidate them too much. So I never thought about that. But yeah, I remember calling this last year because talking about this last year where the way Tennessee moves the ball, there's not a lot of getting to the line and calling the plays. The plays are already pretty much there and designed. They kind of know what they're doing when they get to the line of scrimmage pretty quickly. And then all the quarterback does is read the safety or not. And so, and they know if they're going to run or throw. That's already just, I think a lot of the plays are determined before the first snap of an offensive possession. Don't you? I think Heupel does a lot of, all right, we're going to go here in this order. And that's how they do it.
I agree. I don't think he necessarily tells the order, but I think he tells, like, hey, we're planning to try this, and this drive and see what we can get done. Also on this list, Calhoun, Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yeah.
Is at number 7. And Florida did not make the list. I just noticed that Florida is not on the list.
Yeah, that was that threw me off. I think the only reason Florida wasn't on the list is because Florida is a kind of low morale, struggling program right now. So,
but would you say Auburn is high morale with Hugh Freeze?
Well, I would. I mean, honestly, I mean, they're not high moral, but high morale. Yeah. I would. Look, I don't like Hugh Freeze. I think he is a horrible human being and does not belong. And I think he's a hypocrite, a raging hypocrite, just an absolute terrible person. I know Hugh Freeze stories from, just so you know, Jarreau, I went to high school. Hugh Freeze was coaching at a local private high school in Memphis when I was growing up in Memphis and went to high school. So I know some stories about him there. He was a creep and a bad dude then, and he's a bad dude now. But he can coach. Dude, homeboy knows football. And, I mean, Auburn's going to be good. And so, Mr. Jones, I am not going to share that last comment, okay? So if anybody has issues, you guys can point that. But Jordan-Hare that's a tough place to play. That place gets loud. Now, Auburn's a really crappy place to live. Okay, I'm sorry. I would never take the Auburn job because I don't want to live in Auburn. It's just the worst. Auburn and Starkville are like the two worst places to live. All right, yes, come at me, Mississippi State and Auburn fans. I'm waiting on you, but y'all are the most boring towns in the history of the world. Okay, like a lot of people think Lane Kiffin didn't take the Auburn job because of the Twitter thing, and they debated what's a better job. People say Auburn's a better job. It may be a little bit better of a job than Ole Miss. I'd rather coach at Ole Miss. Oxford's a way nicer place than Auburn. Auburn is just an awful, boring place.
You think Gus Malzahn is living in paradise now that he gets Orlando instead of Auburn?
Yes, I do. And he's about to be in the Big 12, so he's at a Power 5 school loaded with talent. I'd much rather be at UCF than Auburn. Every day of the week, not even thinking about it.
The flagship Big 12 school in Florida, as UCF puts it.
That sounds like something Danny White would have done when he was there. Oh, my goodness. The UCF motto.
You also have Bryant Denny. You also have Bryant Denny number 4 on this list, which I've heard Bryant Denny is kind of overrated.
Well, okay, so people who say that about Bryant Denny are stuck in Bryant Denny before they did the expansions. So Bryant Denny used to have this opening that on one side of the stadium that was there for, I mean, we're talking, it was there forever. And the sound would leave the stadium, so it didn't get that loud. As a matter of fact, Alabama, all the way up until 1997, played their biggest games in Birmingham, not even Bryant Denny Stadium. They played their biggest games in Birmingham. So that it was overrated. Now that they've closed it in, Bryant Denny gets pretty loud. And the only other reason it doesn't, I would say this, and Tennessee had this problem too back in the day. A lot of Alabama fans are old. A lot of Alabama fans are those old guys, sitting down with the little radios in their ear, telling you how Bear Bryant would have done this play. And and so it's gotten louder again because there's now a new young Alabama fan base because of recent years, and they've closed in the stadium. So Bryant Denny does deserve to be there. I'm with you. I still would have put the Swamp on there. I'm a little shocked that they didn't, even though I do think that morale at Florida is low right now. Camp Randall deserves to be higher. It's number 10, but Camp Randall is a brutal place to play. The Big House has absolutely no business being on here. The Big House is the least loud stadium you will ever be in, and you will be lulled to sleep, and it's not intimidating at all. There.
Do you think that conference putting their biggest games at noon, big noon, do you think that affects the fans and how loud that stadium is?
I think it does it for the positive. I think they love new games up there. It's kind of a weird culture, and funny enough, it's 11 a.m. for a lot of them. But yeah, I don't understand it because it's the opposite with LSU because LSU at noon game is you should move the line a touchdown away from LSU, whatever it is, when they play a noon game at home because that Tennessee game last year, everybody was hungover, I feel like. And I remember going to a Tennessee LSU game in 2010 with Derek Dooley at Tennessee, and Tennessee almost won that game because it was a noon game or at 11. But up in the Midwest, yeah, they love those noon games. And I don't know why, but it's because guess what? They drink in the Midwest. So I'm surprised they love their noon games. They drink. SEC fans like to say one thing the Big Ten beats the SEC in, guys. I got to say, Big Ten drinks better than the SEC. The Big Ten handles their alcohol. Midwesterners will drink Southerners under the table every single time. Okay, now Louisiana is a little bit different, but nobody can handle Wisconsin or Michigan. Nobody. It's cold up there. All you can do is drink to stay warm. And so those upper Midwestern states, they drink like Russians. So it's they'll drink SEC fans under the table in a heartbeat. Rugged Up Tom says that's because the Big Ten all descends from Germans, Polish, a lot of those fringe Eastern European countries that I wouldn't say Eastern European countries, but might have been in the Warsaw Pact, even if they wanted to be in NATO. Put it that way. Those countries for little geopolitics. So the Big Ten drinks like nobody's business. So yes, but yeah, they get. Look, what they do, I will say, I'll just tell you guys a quick story, and this is why they get loud for noon games. I went to a Packer game one time with my wife, her family's from Wisconsin, and they do this party bus that takes you from Milwaukee to Green Bay. And I got on the bus at 5 a.m, and they were passing out Jell-O shots. I'm not kidding, at 5 a.m. And this is like people in their 40s and 50s just getting hammered for this Green Bay game, okay? And we get to the stadium, and just everybody's obliterated. Now, the bus ride back, everybody's asleep. Just everybody's out. I don't know who saw the game or didn't, but that's what they do. Travis, you're trying to make a point with whiskey being made in Tennessee. Yeah, but that just because it's made there doesn't mean that Tennesseans drink it the most. Heck, I think, isn't the county that Jack Daniels is made in, isn't that a dry county? You can't even sell the whiskey where it's made in Tennessee because they still have a lot of the, old religious folks saying you shouldn't allow alcohol in these counties. That's very, very common around there. So, yeah, I will say those upper Midwestern schools get pretty loud, except Michigan because the Michigan Stadium, the Big House, is a lame stadium. It's overrated. No one should ever waste their time going there. And so I'll leave it at that. But this goes to another great point. All right, so before we move on, portions of the program are brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports is the new sportsbook in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares on Zen Sports. What you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the code HOOKED. That's HOOKED. That's right, unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting and keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. So building off of this stadium story, this was something I want to share this screen with you guys. Josh Pate shared this yesterday on Twitter. Our man Josh Pate. This was on a Reddit board, and Joe, you're gonna love this. I gotta pull this up and show you what happened. This was. I'm just gonna say this. Homeboy is not coming to. He is not going to go back to Ireland. So this was a dude from Ireland asking about college football in October. And I'm going to read this for those of you listening. Hi, I'm a 36-year-old Irish guy. I'm taking a road trip in October, which will see me coming through Tuscaloosa, seeing an American football game and finding a tailgate party. Not even fully sure what they are, but people say they are great. Are top of my agenda, and some people have mentioned this would be a good place for it. Is there a team here? Are there games in October? Is it hard to get tickets? How do I get to a tailgate party and drink copious amounts of beer? Well, I know how to do the drinking bit already. Okay, so Jarreau, what are the chances he just never goes back home?
I feel like he might just live here every football season now.
Yeah, he ain't going back home. So this is your first experience for an American football game will be a SEC football game in October. You're not going back home, buddy. You're not going back home to Ireland. You're staying. So I'm going to say I want to do this to spark a debate. Okay, Jarreau, somebody from Ireland is coming to America. Some foreigner is coming to America, wants to experience college football. What atmosphere do you take him to? Where do you take him?
I don't want to steal Brad Crawford's flow, but I'd really have to say probably not Tennessee right now when the program's at a peak, or Baton Rouge. I just feel like those are the two epitomes of college football right now, which especially when you're considering not just the stadium, but also the tailgate scene and everything going on around the stadium that you'd want somebody to see. I'd have to say those two. Also, a sidebar. Why is he taking who's coming from Ireland and taking a road trip through Alabama and Mississippi? Why were those the states he picked?
That's a really good question. So when I was in Europe, I will say people are very intrigued by that are intrigued by American culture. They're specifically intrigued by Southern culture. Like people love, like I remember my cab driver in France was a big country music fan. Loved all country music. Didn't speak a lick of English, but loved country music. And I mean, so they're very intrigued by Southern culture in America. So maybe that's why he wants to go through. So this is, I'm going to say it. And y'all know I'm not Homer because I talk about the loudest stadium with LSU and other different things. I'm never reflexively Tennessee's the best, but it's Neyland Stadium. If you want the best environment possible, it's Neyland Stadium because there's two things that make something crucial. And you're right, Tiger Stadium is close, but there's two things that make something crucial. Actually, three. There's the environment. There's the environment surrounding the stadium on game day. There's the town itself. And then there's the stadium itself. Now, if it wasn't for the stadium, guys, the answer would be Athens. Athens is the prettiest college town in America. It has amazing food. The pregame tailgate and all that is so much fun. The problem is Sanford Stadium is lame. It's lame. It's not loud. I don't care what happened last year with Tennessee and Georgia. Sanford Stadium does not get rowdy. So you got to throw Sanford Stadium out. Tiger Stadium is close. My issue with Tiger Stadium, Jarreau, I've been there, is there's not a lot. There's a lot to do in Baton Rouge, but there's not a lot to do around the stadium. You see what I'm saying? As far as if I remember correctly, there's tailgating around the stadium, but there aren't a lot of like bars and restaurants that close to the stadium, if I remember correctly, with Tiger Stadium. Now you can. I'm sure you've been there more recently.
I guess you're right because all of their bars are in one area, and it's not near the stadium. It's probably like half a mile away. Yeah,
that's what I thought too. So that's my one criticism of Tiger Stadium. I would say that Neyland Stadium, Knoxville is the best combination of a town, the surrounding environment, and the stadium itself. Tuscaloosa is a pretty good one, though. I mean, Tuscaloosa is a pretty good one. So it's between those two. I would say it's between those two. I'll say this: depending on when you go, you don't want to do the 3:30 kickoff in Tuscaloosa in October, though. It's a brutally hot place for those 3:30 kickoffs. Neyland is also the best because of the backdrop. Let's call it let's call a spade here. When you go to Neyland Stadium and it's 3:30 and it's October and you got that fall, like crisp, like smoky feel in the air and you see the Smoky Mountains in the background, like you don't get a better football vibe and a better fall vibe than Neyland Stadium during that time, particularly with all the orange everywhere. So I'm going to be honest. Neyland Stadium is number one. I think Knoxville is where you take somebody for a football game in October if you want to get them hooked on American football. What about you?
Yeah, and Knoxville gives you both sides. You've got like the college town-esque part of it, which would be like campus. And then you also present them with like a southern downtown with like 4 or 5 restaurants in Market Square that all serve chicken and waffles. Like you get both sides of the like Southern American argument for somebody who's not from here. So hopefully his road trip will divert, which I also think a road trip through Tennessee would be a lot better than through Mississippi or Alabama. Even like you said, Athens maybe not be the best stadium, but like I would much rather road trip through Georgia than Alabama or Mississippi. That's just me. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, there's not even a debate on that. Yeah, I mean, when I go home to Memphis, a lot of times when I drive from DC to Memphis, I drive through Tennessee, and that's a fun drive because you can stop in Knoxville, Nashville, Lebanon, just a lot of different spots to stop in. My mom lives in Alabama. When I drive to Alabama from DC or from Alabama to DC, that drive is horrible. That drive is horrible. Nobody wants to drive through North Alabama. Sorry, North Alabama. That's a boring place to live. Just like Auburn on the southern portion of the state is a boring place to live. Just a lot of places in that state is boring. At least Mississippi, I will say Oxford is actually pretty nice. And then the Gulf Coast is pretty nice. Now, the part of the reason the Gulf Coast is nice is I'm sure Southern Miss was stealing welfare funds to help like make it look nice. But
I don't think I would not call Biloxi very nice beach-wise, but maybe casinos, you could argue.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. Biloxi. Oh my gosh, I just saw Mr. Jones's last cut. Oh, you guys, this is a family-friendly show. Rocky Top Tom is asking if we've tailgated with the Vol Navy on a Saturday. I have actually not tailgated with the Vol Navy, but that's a great point. The Vol Navy adds to the ambiance of Tennessee football's environment that no other real stadium really has. I think Washington's the only one that has tailgating on the water. Let's be honest. Would you rather go to Washington or Knoxville for a college football game? I mean, so
yeah, imagine putting a European on a boat and say we're going tailgate on the river outside of the stadium. Like it just, I don't think you can really compare that to anything else.
I agree. There's no way. I mean, it's so incredible, and I mean, it's so the whole experience. Yeah, no, Neyland Stadium wins in October. It does. It's the best experience. See, guys, I'm not a Tennessee hater. I don't hate on Tennessee for everything. I am just an objective, call it like it is type of person. Neyland Stadium is the best, but Sanford Stadium would be the best if they closed in the stadium to make it louder. But sorry, I know Rugged Top Tom, you're going to talk about the 9 pre-snap penalties by the O-line at Georgia. It's still not a loud place. Sanford Stadium is kind of lame. It is. It's kind of lame. And so I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, Sanford Stadium and the Big House are probably the 2 lamest stadiums for a big-time college football program. What's another one, Jarreau? What's a lame stadium for like a powerhouse program?
Ohio State.
It is? I've actually never been to Columbus. The Horseshoe's lame?
Well, from everything I've been told, I've never been either, but it didn't even make the top 10. And apparently, while the Horseshoe's like cool and everybody says it's rowdy, all the noise goes out one side. So.
Oh, never thought about that. Yeah, because that's a good point. And then, of course, I think my guess is the Coliseum is probably lame too. USC is probably pretty lame because
I could see stadiums that are on campus like that have to be. I mean, you've got like there's nobody. Neyland Stadium is on like the middle of campus, and then imagine having to drive 45 minutes for a football game as a student. Like it just doesn't. You're not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And also USC and Miami fans just don't care that much about football, so it's totally, they're just, I will never forget Tennessee going to Miami in 2003. And it's like, oh, they beat Miami on the road. I'm like, no, the story is they beat Miami. Beating Miami on the road, it's like that could have been like a home game for them. Miami's got the worst fans in all of college football. I'm hearing, see, Mr. Jones brings up Texas. I've heard Texas is actually not that loud, funny enough, too. I've never been there, but I guess we'll find out with them in the SEC now. And Rocky Top Tom says, inversely, and I hate Tech, he says Virginia Tech fans have a crappy program, crappy stadium, and they get nuts for some football. Yeah, I hear Virginia Tech fans are pretty wild. I would love Virginia Tech in the SEC. I think Tennessee and Virginia Tech would be a naturally great SEC rivalry, honestly, given those two programs.
The Battle of Appalachia.
Yes, the Battle of Appalachia. That'd be so epic. They got to do it. All right. So when we come back, we got one last thing to talk about, and this is kind of an issue that we never thought about, which is that the new NCAA rules are conflicting with some state laws over NIL deals. Who's going to win out on that? We're going to talk about that in 2 minutes. Stick with us.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
Welcome back. Time for everybody to grab your popcorn, because this is a laughable story. So a report came out on ESPN, would have been about 2 days ago, I think, or 3 days ago, by Dan Murphy, which is that the NCAA and state laws are about to clash over NIL deals. And Jarreau, it's laughable because the NCAA is clearly just trying to maintain its credibility here, and I don't know how they're going to win. So here's what's basically happening. Many states have passed laws. Now, the NCAA has basically made it clear that specific type of NIL activities, NIL can't be affiliated with the schools, really, shouldn't be affiliated with the schools, and can't be used as recruiting tools. But many states have passed laws that allow for fundraising groups that are legally separate, yet closely partnered with universities to start paying athletes for NIL endorsements. Texas has passed a law that basically just encourages people to start doing this. So in Texas, there's a law set to go into effect this Saturday, which is tomorrow, that would allow fundraising groups that support athletic departments to raise money for NIL deals. Yes, that's right. So you could literally set up a charity organization or some sort of nonprofit organization and raise money from fans for NIL deals. So basically people can donate money to these organizations that can be used to pay players. So if you want your school to win on Sunday, you can just donate money to this NIL deal. So The NCAA is coming in and trying to be like, you can't do that. And they were saying that the NCAA trumps state law. Texas has already basically been like, nah, son. Texas law trumps what you guys are doing. Not only that, the states are now passing laws prohibiting the NCAA from punishing the schools in those states for doing NIL stuff. This is hilarious. This is another step to just blatantly disregarding and discrediting the NCAA, Jarreau. And I don't know how in the world the NCAA thinks they're going to be able to uphold its power or wield its, or wield its power, or I don't even know the phrase. I don't know how they're going to be able to show any sort of authority on this matter.
Well, I think the biggest problem with the NCAA is, NIL's been happening for what, 2 years now, and they're just now trying to control it. Like, you can't, it's a little late to come into the wild, wild west and try to put laws and regulations in. And the NCAA has lost all their credibility. Nobody takes the NCAA that serious anymore. So, I just don't understand what their goal is with this. Like, who are you going to be more afraid of, Calhoun, the NCAA or your state government?
Oh, obviously your state government. All day, every day. And the NCAA is going to be afraid of the state government, quite honestly. And
because the NCAA is not giving the universities any money. The universities are going to listen to who's giving them money. So why would a public school, like in the article, Texas or Texas A&M, listen to the NCAA and not the people who fund the university? It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
And it's so funny how behind the curve they are. We're talking about an organization that the NCAA fought NIL, and they lose in court, as we all knew they were going to lose in court, because there's just no way you could say they weren't violating labor laws that exist on the books right now with not letting players make money off their names. And then it comes through, and now they're trying to be like, okay, well, let's try to find a way until then they can't use it as a recruiting tool. Well, how are you going to stop that? Like, you can't retroactively come back and be like, okay, fine, NIL's here, but you can't use it as a recruiting tool. What they should have done is 10 years ago, set up a advertising collective for athletes to let them get paid, and then they'd be able to control it a little bit. But by fighting it the way they did, they're behind the curve, and your anger with NIL is not. Your anger at the NCAA shouldn't be for allowing NIL to exist. They had no control over that. Your anger should be them not getting out ahead of it to try to control it when they could have. And the idea that they're going to sit there and say that our law trumps state law. You know what you should do, NCAA? I'm going to quote Dave Chappelle on this. Remember when Dave Chappelle was like, you got a problem, you should sanction me with your army? Oh, wait a minute. That's right. You don't have an army. You got a problem with state governments, NCAA? You should send your police force in. Send your state troopers in. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have a police force. These state governments do. So maybe the state laws are going to trump the NCAA, and by trying to pick a fight with them, I think they're just further escalating their demise, quite honestly.
Well, yeah, because I don't think the state governments were ever enemies with the NCAA. Not to my knowledge did, the Texas state government and NCAA hate each other. But now the state government has no reason not to go after the NCAA, because they're blatantly saying that they want, the association has been clear and maintains, quote, that schools must adhere to NCAA legislation or policy when it conflicts with permissive state laws. Okay, so if they don't, what is the NCAA going to do? Yeah. They don't have any power. And if they do something, like let's say they find that Texas breaks NCAA legislation today. So what, in 4 years, are they going to make them vacate wins? It just doesn't, they don't work fast enough. They don't have any more credibility. This investigation with Tennessee is taking forever, and Jeremy Pruitt hasn't coached at Tennessee in 2 or 3 years at this point. It doesn't, I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. It's laughable that they're taking this long in the investigation. And quite honestly, look, they're scared to dish out punishments now because they know they're trying to stay in business. And the more they dish out punishments, the more they escalate their demise with teams and conferences wanting to break off from them. Look, Rocky Top Tom, I get your problem. You think NIL is evil and you have a big issue with it. Here's my point, Rocky Top Tom. Your issue is with the Sherman Antitrust Act passed in the late 1890s or 1880s, I believe. Because the fact is, You can have a problem with it all day, but there is no way you can deny that not allowing NIL was a direct violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and in no other form of American life would that be allowed. It was illegal. It's illegal to operate an entity like the NCAA and tell people involved, tell the revenue generators that they, I guess you would say laborers, that they can't profit off their own name. There's no way you could sit there and say that's okay. I mean, you may prefer that, but it is against the law. It is a blatant violation of the law for not to have NIL. The NCAA was in violation of the law for 100 years. I mean, that's just a fact. And so you may not think NIL is ethical, but how do you stop it? The NCAA legally can't stop it. The Supreme Court straight up said, you guys can't stop this. You're not allowed to stop it. And now the NCAA is saying that you can't use NIL for recruiting. Again, it's laughable, Jeff. How are they going to stop NIL being used for recruiting?
I don't know. I mean, and technically, I'm 99% sure if you promise an NIL deal, it's okay. But if you give them the money is where the problem is. So you think like Jaden Rashada, where he was promised, what was it, 8 mil, 11 mil, something like that, if he signed to Florida. He was never given money beforehand. So technically there were no rules broken. But he was promised NIL money if he went to Florida. Now, I think NIL probably is not ethical. I do agree with Rocky Top Tom. I'm sure there's schools like we've heard, like the Florida Trust that was trying to give Jalen Rashad all that money. I'm sure those schools are not using it ethically or morally or following the rules. But I do think NIL is fair because these athletes are working more than 40 hours a week, working long hours, more than anybody else who has a real job, and they can't have a real job because they're practicing sports all the time. So it's fair for them to be able to make money off their name and make money off the fame and work they're putting in college. But the NCAA, even if they wanted to put regulations in, it's too late. They can't do anything. That's why you saw Danny White and Dondi Plowman and a bunch of officials from schools go to Congress, because that's where they're going to get regulations, not the NCAA, which, knowing Congress, is sad to think that they're relying on Congress to pass laws to govern college sports and not the body that's supposed to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think Congress should regulate sports betting. They should stay out of NIL. Honestly, they should stay out of it, because I'm fine with the Wild West in NIL. And I will say this, if you're a Tennessee fan, you should be fine with it too, because we've covered recruiting enough, Jarreau, and I'm sure you know, and I want to point this out before we go because it kind of ties into what we're talking about. Tennessee is not in terms of recruiting versus expectations. Guys, Tennessee's not a top 10 job. The high school football in the state is not that good, and it's really there's a reason they've only won one national championship in the past 70 years. And it's because Alabama was on probation and Georgia was terrible at the time. Tennessee can't consistently be great when Georgia's great and Alabama's great, except for NIL. Because Tennessee has the largest NIL collective in the country, so they can go out and buy players, and that's how they get competitive with Alabama and Georgia. And just so people are aware, Spire Sports Group, which is affiliated with Tennessee, is the most ambitious NIL collective in the nation right now. That was another on-through report that came out yesterday. So just so you guys, Tennessee's is number 1, Texas A&M number 2, Oregon number 3, Texas number 4, Miami number 5, Florida State number 6, USC number 7, Arkansas number 8, Ole Miss number 9, and West Virginia number 10. Now, Jarreau, what's really, really funny about that is, okay, so Mr. Jones, you're right. Tennessee can recruit national, but recruiting national is not as easy. Yes, just being a national program to recruit is not the same thing as being able to recruit in your backyard an elite amount of talent. Georgia and Alabama can recruit all over too, but then they can stay in their backyard and load up on talent. Look, this is borne out in fact, guys. I'm sorry. Tennessee has won national title in the last 70 years, and it took Georgia having the worst coach in history, and Ray Goff maybe, and Alabama being on probation, and also Clemson and South Carolina not being arrived. You can't. It's really hard to do that. Tennessee's and you're bringing up Heupel making it look easy. Yes, because of NIL. NIL is the neutralizer for Tennessee. That's how they compete on the level of Georgia and Alabama. But what I was going to point out was that Jarreau last year, so you're going to find this hilarious. Florida's not in the top 20 list on all three. Last year, the report on the most ambitious NIL collectives, Florida was in the top 5. But a month before, we were hearing reports that they were struggling to put it together. And now they're not in the top 20. What we're realizing is that Florida scrambled an NIL collective together and didn't really have all their ducks in a row, and now they've gotten exposed for it.
Yeah, and I mean that's what happens when your group is not governed correctly, or I mean that's the Wild Wild West. Like the groups who put their own rules in place and run it correctly will succeed. In Florida, like we saw with Jalen Rashada, with their kind of thrown together group will not. And it's funny, as we're talking about this, at 11:01 a.m., the Volunteer Club, which is Tennessee's NIL, powered by Aspire Sports, announced that the Volunteer Club is excited to share its partnership with the University of Tennessee Athletics. So the Vol Club exists to create sustainable NIL opportunities for our student athletes, as well as create a community of passionate Vol fans through experiences, events, content, merchandise, and more. This partnership is a win-win for all Tennessee fans. Look for the Vol Club this fall during football season. So
Tennessee and the Texas schools are flipping the middle finger to the NCAA right now. And you guys think the NCAA is going to be able to come down on them? It ain't happening. Isn't this a giant middle finger after the NCAA? The NCAA sent this warning this week that you can't do this. And then Tennessee's like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I mean, what do they expect the NCAA to do? They don't have any real power at this point. Only if you think about like postseasons, the NCAA only really sponsors March Madness, I think. Or is it the NIT? They only sponsor one of them, and it's not like real because the NCAA is not the college football playoff. Like football teams could operate outside of the NCAA and still do the college football playoff realistically.
Yep. No, you're right. And that's probably what's going to happen because I'm pretty sure the conferences are going to form their own, or the conferences are going to break away and form their own. You're going to see the SEC and the Big Ten and maybe one other Power 5 conference that cobbles together whatever teams are left over from the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 12. And it's going to be 3 conferences and 40 to 50 teams. And that's just going to be the way it goes. Now, I will say, Rocky Top Tom, you think you can convince me to not support NIL? You probably can't, but I will say that I'm not crazy about the conferences getting so big, and I'm not crazy about the whole what I think is going to happen, which is 50 teams in one league and a 12-team playoff. I think college football was at its best with the bowl system and things being nationwide, but I accept that that's changing. So it is what it is. Portions of the program brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. For the best prices and service in real estate in Knoxville, there's just one place, andymasonrealestate.com. Andy and his partners have been in the real estate business for a combined 40 years. They know how the market works and how to save you tens of thousands of dollars. Andy Mason and andymasonrealestate.com. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us this week with Dave out. I want to thank Jarreau, who did the show full-time with me Monday and Friday and was on Tuesday and Thursday for a segment. Thanks, Fred White, on Wednesday. Thank you, Josh Ward, on Thursday. Jarreau, this was a blast. Had a lot of fun with you this week.
Yep, the Caleb and Caleb show will have its return one day. Not next week, but one day.
Yes, it absolutely will. You guys all have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the arrival of July. And enjoy the 4th because the 4th is coming up. I can't say for sure if we'll have a show on the 4th, but we can talk about that Monday because we will have a show on the 3rd, which is Monday. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Dave will be back Monday with Caleb Jarreau. This is Caleb Calhoun, and this has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.